about voter retention, or voter identification, and get out the vote efforts. Let's talk about get out the vote first, and go back to voter identification last. A lot of people think of get out the vote efforts as being just a couple of days before the election and election day. It actually starts about 40 days before the election. Most states, well actually every state has some form of absentee ballot, whether it be mail-in. Indiana, we have in-person voting that starts 30 days before the election, but we call it absentee voting, but it's absentee in person, which is kind of weird. We're in a unique situation in Indiana because we also have satellite voting and vote centers. Most places, when they do have early voting, it's only done at the clerk's office or at the courthouse. For us and some of the things we've been doing in Indiana, right or wrong, we allow some clerks to be able to put vote centers into schools. So for that entire 30 days, you went in, actually they don't do it in schools, but there are businesses that they'll set it up in. One of them was a Payless Shoes last year, which was awesome. But there are a lot of issues with vote centers and satellite voting. It's questionable how secure that in-person voting is at those places. So it's important to include those in your get out the vote efforts. What I look at first is the resources that I need to have people man those early voting centers or early voting locations. At the bare minimum, I want somebody there passing out materials in a campaign t-shirt or a slate piece or something like that. But there needs to be somebody there having contact. I'm going to give some examples from the Rupert Bonham campaign, who was the most recent campaign. We were talking about, our campaign headquarters was actually half a block away from the county courthouse. And I said, it's very important that you go spend a couple hours every day for the next few weeks over at the county courthouse, because there will be thousands of people there. That is a big way for people to vote now. And one of the most fascinating things is you'll be standing there and there'll be 100 people in line, and then all of a sudden you'll see 2 rented charter buses pull up and a few hundred more people fall off, and of course it's a county precinct committeeman or a county officer who's standing there reminding them how they're supposed to vote that day. So it's pretty awesome. So you want to make sure that you have people there at those places. Indianapolis, Marion County had 645 precincts countywide, and now it's 548.
500. I thought it was 500 even.
Is it 500 even now?
510, I think.
That's a lot of precincts to cover.
Actually, it used to be 900 something.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Like a while ago. Yeah. And that was just ridiculous. Now, a precinct is actually, under most statutes, is 1,500 to a maximum of 3,000 registered voters is a precinct. The actual number of people who actually show up and vote is significantly lower. Most of the time they will put multiple large precincts together to form one voting district. So you'll have one spot that can have 3 to up to 5. I haven't seen a precinct or a voting place that was more than 5 anywhere. And you want to focus on those big places because there's a lot of votes going through there, and having one person at that is the same as having one person at 5 different locations. So you want to focus on that. And be sure at any point in time, if you have a question, throw your hand up and whatnot, or just throw something at me. So focusing on those voting locations is key. Having somebody out there who can pass out information, but can also answer some questions. That's minimal training. They have to at least know what's on that piece that they're handing out and be comfortable talking about that. Now, in reality, you're not going to get a whole lot of people on election day that are going to come up to you and start asking you 20 questions about your candidate or about your slate. Typically, their mind is made up by the time they hit that door. But there are little things that you can do to persuade them to vote for your guy in the event that they haven't made a decision on some race. And you don't know what that race is going to be, so you try to hit them with everything. The training for going and being a poll worker is as simple as say hello to everyone, thank them for coming out. You can say, vote Libertarian, vote for Rupert, hand them a piece. I also say, as people are walking out, thank them for voting. And it's a psychological thing. It really has nothing to do with actually thanking that person for voting. It has everything to do with the people walking up to you, hearing you thanking that person for voting. And it's some weird thing that it's like, oh wow, that's cool, that they really mean what they're saying. So little things like that can make a big impact. At a precinct where you have a person actually out there working throughout the day who is actually engaging with people and handing out information and isn't just sitting there doing nothing, most times you see a 10% jump in what your total would have been. And this is true for Republicans in heavy Democrat districts as well. When they have poll workers out, they see this uptick because no one knows every single vote that they're going to cast when they walk into that booth, unless they are a straight ticket voter, and even then, there are going to be other races that aren't straight ticket races that they have to actually go in and check off for people. So you can be their option at that point, and those are the votes that you're getting. That's where your 10% bump comes from passing out that information and being friendly and doing that. Now there's another key aspect to working at a poll on election day, and it's different from state to state, but every state has some form of this, and it's a poll watcher. It's somebody who is inside as a representative of either the county, the state, or the candidate. The county party, the state party, or the candidate. And it actually, I think in every single state, it cannot be the actual candidate. It cannot be credentialed as a poll watcher because it's considered electioneering if you're actually in there. And what they're doing is watching for shenanigans, for somebody saying, hearing somebody say, that's not right, I'm registered in this district, I need to be able to vote, and to hear what that clerk is then saying to that person. Because of the recent voting rights, every state has to have a form of a provisional ballot, which says if for some reason you are not being allowed to vote, you get to cast a provisional ballot, which will then be examined by the clerk's office and the election board and determine whether or not it was a valid vote or not, whether or not you were actually eligible to vote in that precinct or not. And those votes, those actually matter. Susan Marie Weber, did I do it right? Okay. Mm-hmm. Came down to provisional ballots. That's how she won her seat on the city council of
Desert or something?
Yeah, that sounds right. Came down to provisional votes. Actually, on election day, she lost. She was fourth in pick 3, I think it was. But because of the provisional votes, she ended up winning by a pretty good margin. So they do matter. So it's important to have somebody there to be able to step in and record it. And most states you're not allowed to actually interfere. But what I would do as a watcher is just say, ask for a provisional ballot. Just like that. And then they can, and then the clerk will normally go, oh yeah, that's right. 9 times out of 10, it's not intentional. The person isn't meaning to suppress that person's vote. It's just these clerks are poorly trained. They're being paid $50 a day to sit there and do this. They're typically older. and they just don't know. They don't know all the rules, the in and outs. They just know that I can't let you sign this book because for whatever reason you can't, so I can't let you vote. And then when somebody says provisional, you'll actually see that person go, oh yeah, that's right, and they'll call over one of the judges and say, I need a provisional ballot, and then everything's fine. And then they get counted. The majority of provisional ballots actually do end up getting counted and do count towards the vote totals. Most of the time, they're clerical errors in why the person was listed as not being able to vote in that precinct. So it's important to have that there. Now, one campaign I spent as a roving watcher, which meant I was in a car and I went from vote location to vote location, walking in with my watcher credentials pinned to my chest, just to see what was going on. And I would walk in, and the very first thing that I would do, and I have no electioneering material on, I've got my credential fully displayed, I walk right up to the clerk's table and I say, hi, I'm Evan, I'm with the Libertarian Party, I'm a watcher. Just want to see, how are you guys doing today? Is everything okay? Has the temperature been all right? Were there any problems starting this morning? Have you guys been coffee? Are you hungry? Are you guys taken care of? Now, in actuality, there isn't a damn thing I can do about any of those things. And so far, I have never been called out on that. You know, and honestly, if one of them ever said to me, I am actually hungry, I would say, okay, well, who's your contact? Let's get them on the phone and see if they can bring over some sandwiches. Or I might even go as far as saying, I'm going to call back to my office and see if somebody can run over here with a couple of sandwiches, because we do have them in the office. But if the temperature's bad or anything like that, I can't do anything. But I do want to know if the machine started on time, and if I've disarmed them by being polite and pleasant and asking them questions about them and how things are going for them, they're going to tell me honestly, actually we started 45 minutes late today because we couldn't get the machines to start up. I need to know that. Because, you know, how many people left that day because that didn't happen? This is something that may not necessarily help me in that particular instance, you know, in that particular campaign, but it will help me the next cycle when I can then talk to the election board and say, hey, look, you know, you were down for 45 minutes. The year prior to that in the election cycle, and all things being even, it looks like you had a 14% drop in voter turnout where the average for the county was only 4%. I think this was attributed to the fact that all 10 of your machines were down for 45 minutes. What is your plan to prevent that from happening in the future? So I have that information. I also, and this is different from state to state, but I will go and I will look at the box or the counting mechanism, or, you know, it's different from state to state, but I'll get a total of how many votes have been cast. I can't tell how you voted, but it's how many ballots have been cast correctly. And then I'll ask, do you have any spoiled ballots? And they, in most states, have to show the watcher those spoiled ballots. And I can look at them to a degree and say, well, you know, there's some issues here. You have, you know, 25 spoiled ballots in the first 2 hours of the election process, and you were closed for 45 minutes. There's a problem here. So I know to alert my campaign team that there's a problem at this precinct, something's hanky here, and we need to look at those spoiled ballots. We need to call question to that. Ask how many provisional ballots have been cast. So I'm incurring all of this data. I also know how many ballots have been cast, and Matt was actually instrumental in this in 2011. By looking at how many ballots have cast, we can actually extrapolate roughly what we thought we were getting based off of voter turnout. Now it's it's an algorithm, and it may not necessarily work in every instance, but you're going to get a pretty good accurate of at least voter turnout with some of these systems. But so this kind of tells us where the day is going. It also helps me know, okay, well, if in this precinct and this type of cycle, only 32% historically show up and actually vote, and I'm already at 24% and it's midday, I know that my day there is pretty much done. I'm not going to get huge rushes. I'm going to get my end of the evening rush, but it's not going to be as big as I would have expected it to be. So I can better plan my resources of where I want to have my candidate, where I want to have extra staff. If I see that there's a place over here that's getting slammed, I can pull a watcher or a poll worker from there and put them over here, or bring in another volunteer. So that's an important function, and it's something that we lack as a party, is that basic structure of how to handle actual voting centers, voting locations on election day, when this can have dramatic impact on that election and future elections. If you know what mistakes are being made or how things are being done, you can have a dramatic impact in the future. As a matter of fact, Brad Kloppenstein, former executive director of the state party, was our lieutenant governor candidate. He's actually on a commission right now with Marion County representing the Libertarian Party, basically talking about the issues that we've had with different voting methods in Marion County as they're moving forward to decide whether or not to keep their current machines or move to new e-machines and things like that. He has a lot of data from these previous campaigns to say this doesn't work, or this works, or this needs to be recorded better, or the people on the ground need the authority to be able to break out paper ballots, which is something they don't have. They have to have an actual sheriff from the clerk's office come and set that up to be able to do that. Well, if the machines are down, the clerk at that branch or the judge at that branch should be able to say, the machines aren't working, we have 200 people outside, it's 6:10, break out the paper ballots. They can still be counted, but they don't have that authority. So those are the types of things that we can, affect change in down the road by operating smartly now on election day. So like I said, 40 days before. But it's not just going to early voting centers. It's also sending out absentee ballots. It's asking people, do you need an absentee ballot? You have to have it significantly before that. Most places are required to register 30 to 60 days before early voting even starts. But so and every state is different, but you may be able to hand out an absentee or mail-in ballot application that the person then has to fill out and send in, just to be able to get their ballot. Now, I know that when I talked to Mr. Dixon, and I was knocking on his door, I know from my walk list sheet that he asked for help getting an absentee ballot application. And I know the campaign manager's team has now sent Mr. Dixon an absentee ballot application. I have this information. Now I'm going to call Mr. Dixon a few days before the deadline and confirm with him that he's actually mailed in his absentee application. Great, Mr. Dixon, glad to hear it. Let me know if you have any problems, if you have any questions or concerns, and of course, we'd love to have your support. Now, once the time starts where he's received, or should have received, his actual mail ballot, I'm going to call Mr. Dixon back up. Mr. Dixon, have you received your early ballot yet? Okay, great. We'll go ahead and fill that out. Send it in. Again, let me know if you have any problems or any questions. And again, we'd really appreciate your support. And thank you for doing your civic duty. Okay. I've followed up with him. I've been engaged. It's a very simple script. Most people don't have problems. The only thing that they might have a problem with is actually reading the text of the ballot. Sometimes it's kind of small and it's harder for older folks to read it. You can have a sample mail ballot. You're required to get those from counties. So I can have that in front of me. I can photocopy it and give it to my people who are phone banking to follow up on these applications. And then they're looking at it, and when he says, I can't read this thing from the fourth line down, I don't understand what this is, they know what it is and they can tell him what it is. One of the things that you cannot do is tell a person how to vote. You can't say, just go ahead and check that first box, that's cool. In every state that's a state crime, and in some states it's actually a federal crime, and if it's a federal office, it is a federal crime guaranteed to do that, so don't do that. And if somebody asks you how you should vote, you can't help them. You can't sway that at all. You can say, at the end, you know, I hope we can count on your support, blah, 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 blah. You can do that, but don't say vote for us. Don't ever use the word vote for.
Well, in the conversation, you've identified yourself as affiliated with this campaign or the Libertarian Party. So when you say, we appreciate your support, they ought to know who it is.
And you can help people find the candidate that they're trying to vote for.
Yes.
You just can't tell them that's the one that they have to vote for.
And you don't want to pull shenanigans like, you know, God, I love Romney, isn't? Because eventually you're going to get, you know, Grandma Betty on the phone who's going to want to tell you about why she loves Romney or why she loves Obama or, you know, and believe me, even as somebody who may be supporting your congressional candidate or your county council candidate, and that's how you got involved with this person, you'll be surprised to hear some of these people who are, you know, diehard libertarians are going to say, well, I really like Romney, or I really like this Republican who we absolutely hate, or this Democrat who we absolutely hate. And so you're, oh yeah, that's great, yeah, awesome. But you're going to have that, and they're going to tell you, you know, avoid the temptation to tell them the day after the deadline to mail that in. Avoid that temptation. I do know that there was a group of people in, I want to say it was Ohio. It was either Ohio or Kentucky, who were all charged with election fraud for telling old folks over the phone who were, and they were Democrats, which was awesome, telling Republican voters the day after the deadline was, so the day it had to be received for it to be counted, they were telling them the next day was the day they needed to mail it in. Because they weren't voting for their candidate. Don't do that. Federal prison is not cool. So, you know, those are some of the things that you want to be thinking about. Before that, you know, throughout your entire campaign, hopefully you're registering people to vote. Every single state, it is illegal to use information from a voter registration application. You cannot use that information. I cannot copy that data down. I cannot photocopy it. I cannot do anything. The only thing that I can do is turn it in. Now, every state is different as to the rules and regulations for doing voter registration. Actually, I believe here in California, Colorado, you actually have to register as a registered voter registration assistant thingy.
We have to register a voter registration drive.
Right.
And it has to have a person, it has to have 2 people, I think, and there's all these timelines for when the VRD coordinator gets the forms. They have this number of days to actually have them in the mail. If they're not in the mail by that point, it's like X number of dollars a day. I don't think we don't have a VRD set up for this year because we sort of shifted. We just get all the party registrants because we run the candidates, and we're not going to run around it like fairs going, please register. We're just cool, register.
It's interesting, especially if it's the candidate doing it. We had people who wanted to have their picture taken with Rupert as they were filling out their voter registration form.
That's neat.
Now, obviously, that's Rupert. I don't know if I would get the same response. I don't think, oh, this is so cool, Evan McMahon, registered votes. I would like to think that's going to happen, but I doubt it. But there is something about actually helping somebody go through the process. You are going to create brand loyalty. This is going to be somebody who's a brand ambassador because you helped them do something. That's one of the keys to politics, is a personal connection line helping you do something or solving a problem for you or with you. That creates, you know, brand loyalty for generations. So I would encourage you in any way, shape, or form within the bounds of the law, register people to vote, because people feel so proud that you know, I've never voted before in my life. I've never registered to vote, but I'm voting now. I'm a registered voter. It really is. And when you see people who have voted for the very first time and they're really happy about that ridiculous I voted sticker, you know, they're really proud of it
Right.
for that first time, and you can be the person who helped them do that. So you don't have to be Rupert to have that personal connection. And they're not going to want your picture with them, but they are going to remember you forever. Maybe not your name, but they're going to remember you, and they're going to remember that you were a libertarian and that it was at this NASCAR event and it was awesome, or whatever it was. That's, you know, we're all about racing in Indiana. But so I encourage, however you can, do voter registration drives. If you can register people by going door to door, I encourage it. It's a great communication tool. What I like to do is actually go out and canvass and have start with getting people registered to vote. I knock on the door and I say, my name's Evan McMahon. I'm from the Libertarian Party of Marion County. Just wanted to see if you were registered to vote, or if you needed to update your voter registration. I'd like to help you with that today.
What are the rules in Indiana? Do you have to?
We don't have to register. We don't have to do anything. We're not. The only thing that we're required to do is make sure that it is within the county election board or the Secretary of State's office within 10 to 14 days of their signature on the form. That's absolutely it. Now they could actually submit their own application. I have been late many times in Indiana by like 2-3 weeks of like, hey, somebody found a stack of voter registration forms that, you know, are in an envelope that are all filled out from that event last week where they told me no one got registered to vote. And now I've taken them to the Secretary of State's office and they just stamp them received, and they're cool with it. And the big problem is if somebody ends up not being registered because you turned it in after the deadline, that's when you're going to get huge fines.
Or if you lose your Republican forms, they get real mad about that.
If you lose a form, that actually is going on in Indiana right now. There are people who were caught losing forms, and they're in a pretty bad way right now.
Yeah, I mean, here the way we get around it when we don't have a volunteer who wants to take the hassle on of being this conduit who's liable for personal fines, is we can give out the forms, we can show people how to fill out the forms and answer questions. They just have to mail it in themselves.
Yeah.
As long as, if we don't take them, then we don't have to be part of a drive.
Right.
It's a
Yeah.
weird. Maryland, you would take a little class,
Yeah.
and you give you a card, and then you could just register voters from then until the time of the war.
And when I say go out and canvassing, it should be a group of people, and you should all be dressed alike, preferably in like a county party or a state party t-shirt or something like that. And the follow-up is, if they're already registered to vote, or they don't need to update their registration, now I'm going to talk to them about whatever campaign issue or whatever we're pushing with the local party. If I've registered them to vote, I take that form, fold it in half, or, you know, it's different for every state. Ours is an 8x10 sheet of paper, and I fold it in half. I stick it in a manila folder or a manila envelope, close it, I don't seal it, but I clasp it, stick it in the back of my folders that I have in my hand, and I say, okay, well, I want to thank you for registering to vote today. I was going to talk to you about a couple of other things, but to maintain the integrity of the voter registration process, I'm just going to leave you my information and come back another day. That also has an impact on people. It's all psychology, and it's, hey, this guy's actually, you know, I know he doesn't know what my political views are, or unless you have like an Obama Rocks sticker on your front door. I don't know what your political persuasion is. I have absolutely no idea. In Indiana, we also don't register a political party when we register to vote. So I literally have no idea what your political philosophy is. I am now stepping away, not trying to persuade you, and saying, I'm going to make sure to handle this first and then come back. You know that I'm not going to just pull an acorn and throw your voter registration form out the window because you're a Republican or a Democrat. People respond to that. Typically, when you go back to talk to that person again, they're very receptive to listening to what you have to say. And you should try to time it for whenever they're going to receive their voter registration card. In Indiana, it typically is about 3 weeks from the date that they received or the application was submitted. What's funny about that is that's if it was a paper form that was submitted. If it's an online form, it can take 2 to 3 months to get your card, which is awesome because actually with the online system, the moment you hit submit, you are instantly registered to vote. But yet it takes, significantly longer to actually get your notification in the mail. So after I believe that they have gotten that, we try to do some sort of follow-up with that, and they're very, very receptive to that. Another thing that you can do, like I said, you can't capture data, but you can leave your information. You can also ask them if they would like to be contacted via phone or email. I don't recommend doing that, but you can do it. If you are going to do it, you need to have a separate form that's not attached to, or don't staple it, safety pin it, paper clip it, glue it, sticker it or anything to that application form, because that creates the appearance that it's part of that official document. You want to have them completely separate in a different folder or different pocket. But after you've done that, then you can, if they're interested in filling that information out. The reality is, very few people are going to fill that second form out because they, no one is like, oh sure, please spam the hell out of me. That sounds great. But a physical personal follow-up is always best after that. Any questions so far?
Well, I live in a state where you can't do any of that.
Well, that sucks for you.
Well, I don't have to worry about one day. I don't have to worry about election day. So anything more about, you haven't really gone into the voter ID stuff yet. Was there any more election day before election stuff as far as your drive and your sort of the mechanics and operational stuff?
Planning out midnight sign drops. So you start that the midnight the night before, or I guess technically the night of the election. Getting your teams together in groups of 3 to 4 with one car. I have a little trick for doing signs. I use a rubber mallet. I use typically poly bags with the U or A frame. I love those. Also poly bags, most of them are biodegradable now. And it's a hell of a lot easier to put 500 of those with 500 frames in a car versus 500 frames and 500 cardboard signs. Poly bags, 1,000 of them fit in a box this big. So I love poly bags. It's easier for me to give to volunteers. So I use a hammer, and if I can, I have a little cordless drill that has a really long coat hanger on it, where the end, where the hook is cut off at the base of that hook, so you have that little curly cue right there. And I attach that to a drill bit. I know this sounds ridiculous. And try to drill into the ground just a little bit to soften it up. Makes it easier to stick it in. It sounds weird, but it happens a lot faster. But you can only have it's what it is, essentially. But if you have multiple people going out on the drive team, it's not necessarily practical to do that. But that's my trick of if I'm actually being forced to go out and put out yard signs, that's how I do it, because I'm lazy. So you have your drive teams. They have to know where they're going. They have to know the rules. I tell people no campaign materials whatsoever other than the yard signs, no campaign shirts that represent any party, current or past or future candidate, no campaign literature whatsoever. Take the magnets off your cars. Preferably you have a car that doesn't have a bunch of bumper stickers on the back of it. That's going to be a hard find in our party, but hopefully you can find 1 or 2. And then you go out and place yard signs in responsible places where you have permission to place them. Is that recording? So you know where you put yard signs. You know the proper places to put yard signs. You know the most effective places to put yard signs. Be smart about it, but have your teams broken up. I like to have my team meet at 10 or 11 o'clock. We get all their stuff together. You're going out. put some 5-hour energy in a little bag, a couple bottles, maybe some cookies, you know, some little snack, and then like we can either go to Steak and Shake or some 24-hour place afterwards and get something to eat after you've done that. Most of these people are suckers and are going to be staying with us until 6 a.m. Or actually until about 5 a.m. when they go to the poll. Or they're helping break out more materials of, these are the yard signs, these are the slate pieces, this is everything else that needs to go out to the polls, and they're broken down by wards so that one person can manage all the different precincts and meet with them. In an ideal situation, you have these people who will meet with the different precincts or voting locations. Everybody knows hopefully where they're supposed to go. If you're working at a poll that day, and again, in an ideal situation, you would break the day up into 3 shifts. A person can work multiple shifts, but you want to break it up into 3 shifts so that people aren't there all day. If you can't do 2 shifts, they need to have a contact sheet that has the campaign manager's number. It has backup emergency contacts. If you have a legal team, in case something happens, have their phone number on it, and then have instructions like, you know, if you agree to work the first shift, you agree to be there until, you know, this time, or the next person will relieve you. If you have any questions, please call. If you see anything out of the ordinary, please call. If you're not sure if you should call or not, call. So, you know, you put that on there, and then you send them on the way. The other thing is their cell phone needs to be charged up until 6 a.m. or whenever their shift starts. So they don't like, you know, oh, I'm you know, getting up in the morning, I've unplugged my phone, I'm going to go to work for a couple hours, and now I'm going to go start working at the poll at noon, and I don't have my phone, or I, you know, haven't charged my phone in between then. Because you're going to be texting and you're going to be calling, and the last thing you want is for your phone to die at 5:30. And you can't get through to tell somebody there are 300 people outside this precinct who are being turned away even though they were in the line at 6. You don't want that to happen. I ask people if you have a spare battery, make sure it's fully charged and bring it with you. Bring your charger with you, preferably a wall charger, not a car charger. But so you want to think about those things, about what could go wrong. So if something happens at this point in time and the person's been there all day, what is the likelihood? If I've been asking them back and forth, how many people have you seen? Do you need anything? Are you cold? Is it raining? Has anybody shot at you? You know, are you still alive? You know, texting back and forth or calling is going to drain your phone, and the last thing you want is for at the end of the day you can't get a hold of us. So you think all the way through that, you know, every possible scenario, which is hard to do. But, you know, there are things that I can't anticipate happening. The most common things to happen is a cell phone dying, a person not showing up, a person leaving early, a person being there with their good friend because they're high school or college kids and they spend the entire day talking or posting on Facebook. So it's one of the important things is somebody needs to be a roving watcher who goes around to the different precincts and makes sure that Joe isn't sitting in a lawn chair, you know, with his eyes closed at lunch when people are coming in to vote en masse. So doing that and checking on people. But you want to make sure that everybody is trained ahead of time. The last thing you want to do is have 40 or 50 people who are showing up to work for you on election day that have no idea what they're supposed to do. That was really, really sucks. Any other questions? Oh, we've got 10 minutes. Sweet, that's like a lifetime.
So our state's all screwed up. We have partisan registration.
Yep.
We have, if the law that just passed doesn't get struck down, we now have election day registration, same thing, registration, and we have they've now expanded. We've had mail-in ballots for a long time, and I'm on the I'm always mail-in.
Yeah.
So our elections actually happen about a month before our elections, because you have to have any contact you have
Mhm.
before they receive their ballot from the clerk.
Mhm.
Because once they fill it out and they send it, those are unpersuadable voters.
They might be unpersuadable, but here's an interesting thing. Just because somebody has voted doesn't mean that they can't change their mind and tell other people.
That's true. But
That actually does happen.
it's like, it's sort of the opposite of New Hampshire. Everything happens.
Right, before, right.
I mean, we have polling places. I drop my ballot off because I don't want to spend the extra postage.
Right.
But it's a box in the clerk's office. It just sits there, drop it, and it's got little stickers next to it.
Yeah.
I voted.
I said the one advantage to same-day registration is you don't have to fall under motor voter, so there's no provisional ballots.
Mhm.
It cleans up a lot of stuff,
Right.
the shenanigans.
And
Then,
you know,
then the
that's-
voter can just, if they have their driver's license, then they can just register to vote. And
That was one of the key factors in Jesse Ventura winning
Right.
his governor run, was same-day voter registration.
And so we haven't figured out even how we're gonna take advantage of that yet,
Yeah.
but they're also making it so you don't have to be an active voter to get your mail-in ballot. You don't have to select mail-in. Everyone will receive mail-in ballots, even if you haven't voted lately.
Like Oregon.
Yeah.
If you haven't voted or if you haven't registered.
So we used to have a distinction between active and inactive voters.
Okay.
So, like your A voters are always active because they vote every cycle. I think you stay active, you have to vote the cycle before to be active.
Mhm.
If you're inactive, you have to contact the clerk if you want a mail ballot.
Okay.
They won't just send it to you,
Right.
or you have to go in person. But now they're doing away with the distinction. Everyone will get a mail ballot whether you've asked for it or not.
Mhm.
So our entire election will be done. Well, it'll all be done either 30 days before
Mhm.
or the day of.
That's awesome. That actually really sucks for you.
It's just different. It's weird.
Yeah.
It's, you know,
you have like two sets of campaigns. You got your 60
Right.
to 30-day out campaign and voter stuff, and then your last, your
Well,
20.
the good news for you though is if I was still a Republican and I saw this, that means I would spend absolutely no resources on election day. I would do my radio, my drive time ads, but that's basically about it.
right.
I would have some very key places, probably my home district or my home precinct or those surrounding areas or the candidate's home district. I would have people there just because of media and stuff like that. But I probably wouldn't focus
They're going to
at
spend
all on election
their
day.
money trying to kill it in the courts.
Wow, really?
Yeah, they're already gearing up.
Um,
I like it when Republicans spend all their money on legal.
Well, I can definitely see Republicans wanting to kill that. I would wager to bet that like every Democrat would love that. But so, if it stands, the benefit to you is nobody's going to be at the polls
Right.
from the parties. So if you can organize successfully there, if they're that bad that they haven't filled out the mail-in ballot that was sent to them already, that's a serious undecided voter that you're going to be able to talk to. And since there aren't going to be a whole lot of other people there, you can take the time to actually talk to them, other than just thanks for voting. You might actually be able to have more in-depth literature to hand to a person to make an informed decision. You might be able to talk to them a little bit more. That actually sounds like a good thing for you, being able to get, because I know there were some races that were really close, 48%.
46,
46%.
42. It was, I think it was a 6-point swing when it was the race.
Well, if you're dominating at the polling places where there are Democrats or Republicans, 6%, wow. That might be very doable. So I would definitely try to maintain like this wasn't happening and build an election day team.
Probably, I would recommend also maximize the number of candidates and the crossover in that
Mhm.
district, so you can have the volunteers there and the candidates are available for chatting.
Yeah. Any other questions? We've got 5 minutes.
What about, one thing I've noticed that especially the Dems do, they'll have a poll watcher with a copy of the checklist. It's their checklist of their ones and twos basically, and they say, okay, and by noon they say, okay, these are all our super elected voters who haven't shown up yet, and they're calling and offering a ride. I mean, that's a whole machine operation.
There's wagon books are typically maintained by either the county election board or state election board for the major parties. I don't know of a single state that has access to them.
No, I want to say the campaigns have these. They're the poll watchers.
Wow,
But
okay.
they're, as people come in, they're checking them off and saying, oh, yep, we talked to Susie, she's one of ours, great. And then at like around lunchtime, once that's over, they say, okay, here's the 100 people who said they were going to vote who haven't shown up yet. Somebody that, whatever, ideally it's, it's on your tablet, and you just send it back and say, somebody call all these people, or get the guy with the van.
The 8 voters that
Right.
haven't shown.
Yeah, that's a total, sophisticated machine operation.
Like in Indiana, we can't do that.
I guess that every state's election laws are different, but.
The reason for that is, in most places, a watcher is limited to only watching, which means you can't ask questions, you can't do things like that. Here's the thing, you also can't stand behind the clerk. You can't ask the person what their name was in case you didn't hear it. You can't actually physically, you can be there to watch the process of the person signing in, but you're not allowed to examine the book that they're signing in on.
These are people who are basically, they're close enough to hear everything, and they've got their binder, and it's got this everything's, tabbed and stuff, and I have some that they're checking off, and then you see them, at the end of the day, they go a bunch of them, they switch shifts, and one guy's outside, and he's making phone calls for everybody.
If you have enough resources that you can have somebody outside, as well as somebody inside doing that, as well as kind of paying attention to what's going on in other problem areas, go for it. Most places don't have that many people, and I think having a person outside who's trying to sway undecided voters.
Well, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about, you said you got your voter ID list.
Right. I understand what you're saying. You have a poll worker inside. I'm saying a poll worker outside is more beneficial if you only have two. If you only have one person to work at a precinct.
It's a question of scale, but I've seen, and maybe every state has different laws of where you can stand and what you can do inside the polling place.
Every state says that if you're an outside poll worker, if you're an electioneer, you're not allowed inside as a watcher.
Right, and our watchers are completely, inside watchers are completely sequestered. They actually confiscate their cell phones.
Oh wow, really?
Yeah,
I
you
mean,
can't.
How does your legal team allow that?
Yeah.
It's just
Well,
that's the way it
They
is.
could be communicating.
They can be communicating what's going
People's
on.
phones,
Right.
things like that.
I mean, we don't even. I mean, our place, if you have a lapel pin, they make you take it off.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, it's a
We don't
12-hour
allow any
commitment
electioneering
to be
material at
a
all.
poll watcher.
And ours isn't this, you can actually come and go as you please.
Oh, yeah.
I think there's some new stuff in HAVA that they're rolling out that may be, because I didn't see it my last election, but this was I think 2010 the way they just wanted, or it was I think I made it in a swing district and they were trying to let's get that extra 10% to swing it. So, but I've definitely seen that operation.
If you have the resources to do it, if you can put two people in a place, then yes, absolutely. If you have the data too. My thing is if you're looking at a precinct where you're only talking about 40 people that you know are going to be going in and voting because they've already identified themselves to you as a voter for that particular precinct, that might not be enough to justify that person not being outside of the place that gets, 800 votes.
My precinct was several thousand people, so voter turnout of 5,000 or 6,000.
Okay.
So.
That to me would then say, okay, that's a good place to have somebody standing there checking off to make sure your 1,000 voters show up. But if you're talking a place where it's significantly small, then have somebody outside. If you have enough for two people in a lot of places, it's just picking and choosing and being smart about it, but using your resources the best and having that good data. But then you also are going to have people who are the way they used to do it with wagon books was literally you had this book that had these perforated tags on it, and every voter, every one of your voters, I don't care, had their own page. And every few hours, a person would walk into the precinct, and the person would go and tear off the tags for the people who hadn't voted. And they would hand them to them. And then they would take them out, and then the volunteer teams would then sit down and start calling them. So you have to have that person that can then start calling people too. Or you have your check sheets and they come and run and pick them up and do all that. Okay, we gotta go. Call this game.